Hi, I'm Beth Clary, president of the Newburyport Chamber Music Festival Board, here to have a conversation with Eliana Yang, who will be joining us this summer in an official capacity as part of the Caroling Quartet. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. I want people to know about, and I'm kind of curious about um, your your story, like how you came to be where you are and how you're handling the pandemic and all of that. So tell us whatever you want people to know.
Yeah, so I'm David's daughter, right? So that's my connection to the festival. So that's why I'm here with you. But I'm upcoming junior. Is that how you say that? Upcoming, rising junior at the Juilliard School, cellist. And so yeah, this whole pandemic, it's been interesting to have music school virtually. It's actually worked out better than I would have thought, um, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm home with my family, no one has tried to kill each other yet, so I think that says something. I can't complain. We're all healthy, and we're not. I'm not in New York City anymore, so that's also lucky because everyone there is cramped into a tiny apartment. I have friends who say that they haven't left their apartment for 8 weeks, and I'm grateful that I don't live there. Yeah, yeah, it's a lot. So in Philly, at least it's a little more open. It's still very urban, so lots of people. But if we wear our masks and stuff, we can go on walks together, which is nice.
Wow, wow. And so how has was there lag time between when you came home and when Juilliard was able to make it work electronically or
Yeah,
technologically?
yeah, we left for spring break, right?
Ah,
Like right at the end of February, and then heard right towards the end of spring break that we weren't going to come back, which caused a lot of problems for people because all of our stuff was still at Juilliard. So
oh, of
we had
course.
to, a lot of people, I'm lucky because I'm so close to New York because we're in Philly, yeah. So that was easier to go up, from here. Um, but I don't know, my friends in Korea or Canada or something, I think that was difficult. They had to either hire somebody or pay their friends to move them out. Juilliard tried to help out. The office actually packed up some people's rooms and stuff. But
Wow.
um, yeah, but it's just kind of, it was sad because everyone left their friends not knowing that we weren't going to see them for over 6 months.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. And so is spring break a week long?
it's 2 weeks.
2 weeks. And so in that time period, were the faculty able to figure out how to, like, what classes were you taking that you had to then shift to Zoom, I guess, right?
Yeah, actually, now that I think of it, now that you're saying that, they did it really quickly because I don't think there was much of a lag. I think they delayed a week, maybe two, but um, given how much they would have had to organize, that's really impressive. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm grateful for that. Yeah, yeah, everything just switched to Zoom, and I think we all just had to kind of adapt. The teachers did their best. The offices, I can't imagine the scrambling that must have taken place. So we're lucky that they did that for us. But yeah, ear training and theory and stuff, they're interesting over Zoom. It worked out okay, but um, listening, like taking dictations, where somebody plays the piano and you have to write down different melodies. It's interesting to hear over the computer and to kind of it's very different, and singing, because in ear training we have to sing a lot. And singing into your computer where a bunch of people on the screen are listening to you sing, it's a little unnerving, but that's okay. And lessons worked out okay. A lot of people had external mics, which help with picking up more nuance and stuff in the playing, because that's a lot of the time that's what's missing if you're
Uh,
going through the computer, and then the teacher can't hear the stuff they need to hear. But it worked out okay. Chamber music is the only thing that didn't work as well.
huh.
Um, because we're not in the same room as someone, and the technology isn't yet advanced enough to pick up sounds at the same time together. And chamber music, it's all about listening to the people around you, so it doesn't really. I guess orchestra also doesn't work, but um, yeah. So that was interesting. We just got private lessons basically on chamber music parts with the coaches, which was actually really great because I got to work with Lori Smuckler is her name. who's an amazing teacher, amazing violinist, which was really fun to work with someone who is not a cellist, you know, because it's a slightly different approach, and it's just really eye-opening. She's amazing. So that was a plus, I guess, even though I really missed playing with my trio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we missed not hearing your trio in Newburyport too. That was a big disappointment. Personally, I was super excited about that. So
Yeah, we were really excited. I'm really lucky though. This group is it's rare to find people that you work so well with, and who you match up kind of musically. You're on the same page. It's actually really difficult to have that kind of chemistry. So hopefully something will work out again. But we're gonna try to keep like playing together, however that works in the fall. Yeah. So.
and who set the three of you up? Did you choose each other, or did a faculty member help with that?
Yeah, so after the first year of school, you can set your own groups up.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I knew the violinist before from a program that we did, and the pianist came as a recommendation. So we read together. We actually read with several different pianists, and you kind of see the vibe. You see, you know, what do we listen well to each other? Do we communicate well? And do we have the same goals? Like if one person says, I just want this to be kind of a side group, I kind of we just, you know, I'm just doing it for the credit, which is viable. A lot of people want to focus on their solo stuff. But the violinist and I we really wanted to go in deeply, you know, with our group. So we were lucky we found a pianist who
Wow.
everything matches up. It's crazy. We would always have we have weekend dinners and stuff together, which is just really nice. They're amazing people. So I'm really lucky. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So what happens in the fall? Do you know yet what Juilliard's gonna do?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a complicated schedule. I kind of understand it. I think they're breaking up the whole year. First of all, they're extending into June instead of stopping in May, right? Like it usually does. And they're breaking the blocks up. They're breaking the year up into 7-week blocks.
Huh.
So the first block, you know, September 1st or whenever, is 7 weeks of totally virtual. I'm actually moving to New York during that time anyway. But I guess that's so that people can stay where they are for longer. And then I think the next one is going to be you can come if you want, but I think the school is trying really hard not to force anyone, you know, if you're not comfortable doing in person, even for the whole year, I don't know, don't, you know, so they're really trying to accommodate. But I think a bunch of my friends were all going to go in earlier and hope that, you know, it'll work out and it's safe to do some, you know, with distancing, some in-person stuff, because a lot of us just like really miss playing together. And you know, it's such a social thing, actually, music, you know, being a music student. So that's we miss that aspect, you know.
I bet. And so are the other two musicians in your trio going to be back personally?
I think
Physically, I mean.
yeah, I think one of them will come back on the earlier side. The other one's not sure yet, because the complicated thing is that since they're offering a lot of things online still and possibly extending through the whole year, I'm not sure how that's going to work if half of us are there and half of us aren't. But for a lot of people, it depends on if they're private teachers willing to give in-person lessons. And you know how a lot of music professors are on the older side and they're less willing, which makes sense, to go in person. But then if they already say I'm not going to teach for the whole year in person, then it's a much lower incentive to come at all and pay rent and pay for, you know. So I think a lot of people, if their teacher says that from the start, I'm not going to teach this year in person, then a lot of them aren't going to even come like for any of the blocks. And I think my pianist is in that situation right now, so she's trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Are you all the same year, that your trio? Are you all the same year at Juilliard?
They're both grad students, so
Oh.
yeah, so significantly older actually, because the violinist, he's Israeli, so he was in the army for 3 years. I think so, before coming to school. So he's older than I am by a bit. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you just got to do it while you can, right? I guess that's the game. Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, you can't really start to delay that there, I think.
Is your cello teacher going to be there?
Yes, so she's one of the few who is willing to do in person, as long as she trusts the student, you know, as long as we're all careful. It's actually kind of funny that one of the things people are worried about is the ventilation in the building. because I guess if it's been off now for so long, I heard this gross thing the other day, which is that there's like something that can grow in the vents that then once they suddenly turn them back on, can like make everyone sick. So she's actually most concerned about the air in the building and not even, touching stuff or,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of
put it on now, for goodness sake. Get that stuff out of there.
right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so let's find out how you chose cello.
I wish I had a very romantic story about that, but I don't. It's because I wasn't doing well in the other instruments that I was playing, which my parents are both musicians, and I started on violin when I was really little. I think like a little cereal box wrapped and with drawn on strings, and I think I was okay at it, but I was an awful student, and I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to practice. So I started piano, and apparently, my dad says I was actually kind of good at piano, but I was also an awful student. I don't know what maybe my discipline was not there, but I would just like come into the piano lesson, and I would just kind of fall asleep on the keyboard, and the teacher would poke me and say, come on, can we practice? And I would, no, I don't want to. So I think he got sick of me, so they were like, okay, let's try cello, and that kind of stuck, But yeah, I mean, a lot of people have a story, it was their calling, it was their voice, and I don't have that. But I love it now. I'm happy I stuck with it, obviously.
Not to throw a curveball at you, but did your grandfather play cello?
Yeah, very poorly.
Oh, sorry, I wouldn't have asked.
No,
I knew.
That didn't really have much to do with it. I actually played on his cello for a while, but yeah, I think he played in the army not World War II. Actually, I don't know, but one of the armies at some point, and he was like last chair, last in, last chair, and it was more of a joy thing, which is nice. But yeah.
So it's not for that romantic reason that cello is.
No, not for that either. Not trying to kind of connect with him in that way. No.
Yeah. It's one of those instruments that, for me personally, I have a playlist in my iTunes library that's all cello music, because there's something about it. I can't say that about piano. And some mandolin, but there's something about the cello that I've read that people say it's sonically most like the human voice.
Yeah.
And
it's
maybe
funny
that's.
No, it's funny that you say that, because I think cello, more than any other instrument, if you say, if you meet someone on the street, or anytime I tell someone I play cello, they're always like, oh, it's my favorite instrument. Yeah, so maybe it is that. It's the human voice thing. I haven't really thought about that, but I've always thought that it was interesting that kind of, it elicits that response more than any other instrument that I've heard, Like my violinist friends, people are like, ew, that's annoying, it's too high, which is kind of how I feel about violin too. But yeah, so that's kind of fun. Maybe it's the voice thing. It's possible. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's are you familiar with I guess he'd be considered a country western musician, sort of a western swing country western musician, Lyle Lovett?
No.
Are you familiar with him? Okay. Here he has one song. It's called "You Can't Resist It." Side note, I'll send it to you so you can hear it. But he has this man who's a cellist play this improvisational bridge in the middle of this song that first time I heard it, it was sounds I didn't think the cello could make. So it's I think that made me love it even more, that it sounded like something else too. So
totally. Yeah, that's funny. A lot of people ask when I say I play cello, they're like, oh, are you in a rock band? Which is funny because I'm not, and none of my friends are either, but maybe I should look into that, do something different.
I don't know. Well, we'll see. Just in case people are interested and haven't watched it, your dad has a conversation with Seb, whose last name I'm not going to pretend to pronounce, and he's into all kinds of music, just generally, but also on cello. And he was here in Newburyport last summer, and the way he made it sound when I was asking him about that was pretty impressive. So I think there are obviously cellists make it strange, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I know, totally. Yeah, and it can
uh,
be, it's fun to branch out, I think. So
yeah,
I hope to do
yeah.
that.
So chamber music is your thing. Is that genetic or what's the story?
I guess. I don't know. But
You
yeah,
don't want to rebel and join a rock band or something like
I
that?
know, you would think. Maybe I should. Yeah, you're planting some ideas. But
Sorry.
I won't tell my dad. But um, yeah, I don't know. There's just no other feeling like sitting in a room with, in a quartet, three other people, and kind of you're literally creating something together. And I think part of it, I think the main part of it for me is actually the communication aspect. That I think it's so. I mean, I love being with people, and I love talking to people and getting to know people. And I think that kind of communication is so intimate in a way, even if you don't necessarily know like where they're from or whatever the basics. And I just think that's so cool. And it's like speaking another language, and I think it's just so satisfying um, when
You're
it when it works, and then when it doesn't, that's even more disappointing because you're like, I know
yeah.
it, um, yeah,
You're talking about communicating with the other musicians,
yeah,
but
yeah.
then there's the whole communicating with the audience as well.
That too, yeah.
I mean, do you feel like if you're communicating with each other as fellow musicians that it will do the right thing for the audience, or do you feel as you've improved and kind of gotten more sophisticated about music, do you feel like you have to be aware of the audience or not so much?
Yeah, a lot of people feel very differently about this. So I'm always interested to hear as audience members, audience members tend to not know as much about the
Right.
music or what's going on, So I think that since I'm never going to be in that position again, I feel so removed from what that experience is. So I don't overthink that aspect, which maybe I don't know if that's selfish because I'm just thinking about my group, but I do think that audience members I think you can feel when people are on, and I think what probably is communicated most, and not necessarily like, oh, they did that crescendo there, like that's great, um, it's that energy that we can create and the energy that I'm talking about enjoying myself, that can bleed through, and that comes through very strongly. And I don't know, but then you hear groups that hate each other but still move audiences. So then I don't know. I'm not really sure what it is. I think it's also just beautiful sounds that audience
Right.
members love, and that's our job to just kind of do it as well as we can. But I don't know. Yeah, I should
I,
think
I
more.
grew up with an interesting set of parents. My father viewed his responsibility as making sure all of us understood how sports were played. He wanted us to also play them, but I grew up outside of Boston, and we had to go to, the Red Sox and the Celtics and the Bruins, and, see how all these, and we had to be able to speak the language of sports. My mother was the arts parent. And so every year since I was probably 8, we had to go to the Museum of Fine Arts, some contemporary museum that she couldn't stand, but she thought it was important that we go to the BSO. She was a season ticket holder to the symphony and the ballet and the theater. She felt that this was her responsibility as a parent. And I think I was probably 13 when I went to my first chamber music performance. And I wish I could remember which group it was, but I can't. And I remember thinking, I've been gypped. Why am I just hearing this for the first time? She was a big symphonic person. And I get the wonder and glory of that, but that was a turning point for me musically, is that intimacy. I think you hit the word right on the nail, or the nail right on the head. I think that intimacy, even if it's in a hall of 200 people, when you're seeing 2, 3, 4, 5 people play so together, and you get to watch it. I mean, it's pretty spectacular. And then
Yeah,
there's nothing like it, actually. There's
yeah.
nothing like it. So,
Yeah.
but I'm glad it's not out of familial pressure that you're doing this.
No, no, I'm really lucky. My parents haven't been. I mean, you hear horror stories about people whose parents are musicians and the pressure, and I think my parents were aware of that, so they almost did the opposite, and they were very, you know, do what makes you happy if you don't want to do it. And now, of course, I wish they had maybe practiced more, but you know, that's fine.
What would you have done if you couldn't have done music? Like, do you have other, what other kind of passions do you have?
I don't know. You know, I mean, this question comes up a lot. I wish I had some kind of, you know, second hobby that I'm really into, and I don't. But I do think that I've gone through phases of possibly, you know, I used to say, oh, I wanted to be a writer, and now that has passed. Now that I've written enough essays that I know it's a little difficult, as you know very well, probably. But I think something with design, actually, I'd love coming up with ways to arrange a room and what to put in it and different looks and stuff. So much more visual than what I actually do now. So that's interesting. Either that or something where I like help people, like coach people, or you know, some kind of not necessarily therapy, but I love, you know, sitting with people and talking, and I guess everyone likes that, so maybe I'm not special, but something like that. I love hearing people's stories and kind of going really deeply into someone else's life. So something where that comes up, I don't know what that would be. But
Well, actually, I don't think everybody likes to do that. And I think the key is that it's the listening part. I think people like to talk, but I'm not sure that they like to listen. So,
yeah, right. I have noticed that actually as a tendency. That's true.
yeah. But I bet if you really like to hear what other people have to say, it reminds me of a particular concert I heard by the Danish string quartet. It was one of Barber's string quartet, I think the number 4. And they're a really charming quartet, the Danish string quartet is. And I don't remember their names, but the violinist stood up and explained the where the inspiration for this quartet had come from. And he wanted the audience to listen very carefully, because he believed, so Barber and I can't remember the violinists, were asked, and I don't know who paid for this or anything, but right when World War II came to an end, they went around Europe and played at concentration camps and other prisons where they were waiting to be released and sent home. And when they came back from that, Barbara wrote this beautiful quartet that's actually, as this young man told us, is in C major, which seems a very surprising chord for something that you think would be pretty solemn. And he said, you know, the important thing that Barber did when he was on this tour is he listened to the people that he was playing for. He wanted to hear their stories, and he wanted this to tell their stories. And in the second movement, there is a point at which you hear a C major, at which you'll never hear a C major in this context again. And so I mean, going on a little too much, but just to say that I think the listening thing is such a tremendous gift. Anybody that can really listen is great. And since you like, I mean, I hope you'll use your expertise in chamber music to do that when you're performing, to share the background, because that, I mean, I think a lot of people probably know stories about what they think the inspiration for pieces should be or could be, but to actually hear it from somebody who, you know, has studied it and taken it in, you know, that helped me hear that piece differently than I probably would have otherwise. Yeah. I think the listening is a gift unto itself for sure. So let's talk about food, because food's a big theme in the Yang family. So you never wanted to be a chef, huh?
No, I'm actually, I like cooking, but I'm definitely better at eating. And I think the reason is that everyone around me is so good at cooking that I've never had to do it, but I'm sure that I could have done. I'm fully capable of cooking if I have to, but I do get teased in this family because everyone else cooks dinner and then I slack off and I never do it. But it's because they do it, you know what I mean? Like, they're willing, so I've never had to, you know, what's that expression, like, like if it's necessary, it's something that's more out of that. Yeah, but
can't remember the phrase, but yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Yeah. But
You,
yes, we have some very good cooks in this family. I'm lucky.
do you have a favorite food?
I have a favorite food that has nothing to do with my family.
Oh,
It's actually it sounds silly, but it's from a hot dog place in New York City. It's called the Papaya King.
oh yeah,
You know, okay.
yeah.
So it's I think the reason that this is my favorite food ever. I get a hot dog with red onion and sometimes sauerkraut if I'm feeling sour. Um, I think the reason that it's my favorite thing is because you only get that if you're feeling kind of munchy. And it's open 24/7, and there's one right down the street from school. So I went a lot. I have gone many times with my friends in the middle of the night. And I think it's because you only get that when you're really hungry, and then it's the best taste in the world. You know what I'm talking about. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
yeah, there's nothing like a papaya hot dog.
yeah. Is the word green in their title? Why do I always want to call it papaya? What is it, Papaya King or?
I'm not sure about the green. It's possible. There are a lot of good hot dog places in New York, so
Yeah, but that one's Upper West Side, right? I mean,
it's everywhere. But yeah, it's
Oh,
concentrated in the Upper West Side. Actually, I think you're right. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. A temptation for you. So
yeah.
close.
I know it's a problem. Yeah,
More self-control,
right,
more discipline.
right.
Oh well,
Right.
not that's a good kind of challenge, I think. Um, so what about if your dad asked everybody this, so I'm going to ask you this, about your favorite pieces that you would want to take with you if you, I don't know. He says deserted island, and I think of it as desert island, but whatever, you know what I mean. I'm not sure. But anyway, you're on an island with nothing and you want 5 pieces of music. What would it be?
Yes, I also thought it was Desert Island, but maybe we've been reading it wrong or something. But anyway, yeah. So my deserted island collection. This was really hard to kind of boil it down to only a couple pieces. Because I also think a lot of musicians, we go through phases, you know. And I don't know, maybe I'm not old enough to have kind of I keep returning back to the same pieces. But right now, my list is Mozart. Honestly, anything by Mozart, but Mozart Don Giovanni, which is an opera. You probably know it. And it's I guess it's a tragedy. And it's also in my favorite key, which is D minor. And I think that might be because it's also Mozart's favorite key. So I'm just copying him, I guess. But I think honestly, if I had to choose my favorite piece of music ever, it would be this.
Wow.
It's I don't know. I don't know how to. I'm not uber romantic about stuff. I'm not. I don't generally feel. I don't cry that much when I play music or anything. But this piece is just so evocative. Like he makes you feel every single thing, and it's so immediate. And I think there's something about voice also. I actually really love vocal music. Yeah, and I think I also way prefer music in minor because I think it's much more interesting than just everything's fine all the time. You know what I mean? It's like the bad guy in stories and movies. It's always the bad
Yeah.
guy. Way more interesting, you know. So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So that's definitely top top. Honestly, I think yeah, number one. And then Beethoven 131, which is probably an answer a lot of people are going to give, but it's a very late Beethoven quartet. It's unusual because it has, I think, 7 movements. Most of his pieces have, 4 standard structure. But yeah, Beethoven is known for kind of switching emotions really quickly, so you'll have something that's really, really angry, and then it comes to a stop, and then it's like heavenly, and it's creepy. It's actually creepy. And that piece, it's in C sharp minor, which is a really difficult and strange key. It's very unusual. It has a lot of sharps and not too many composers. It's not very resonant, so it doesn't come up very often. But that piece is also just so dark. I'm looking at my list now and I realize, yeah, everything is in like minor. So
There's a pandemic. You're allowed.
yeah, that must be why. But yeah, it's just that piece also is just, it makes you feel so many things. So for someone who doesn't generally think like that when I'm listening, I don't generally feel I don't get into it too much. This one is, it's just, again, just so immediate, kind of like Mozart. Um, yeah, and it's just great harmony and great writing, and I love it, you know? So that's number two. The third one is Sibelius Violin Concerto,
Oh,
which is, some people find now that it's overplayed a lot because everyone works on it all the time. But it's, Sibelius has this unique thing where very early on, when I was, I don't know, 15 or something, my dad would often play random pieces by composers I knew, but I didn't know that piece, to kind of train your ear to listen for, you know, a style or something. And Sibelius is so immediately recognizable because his music, all, like, everything he writes that I know sounds like lonely. I don't know how else to explain it, but it just sounds so lonely and so kind of sad. Um, and it almost, I mean, now that we're talking about deserted island, it kind of feels like that. Like his, I often, and cold, kind of like I often visualize when I'm listening to Sibelius kind of a like Siberian landscape or something. I mean, he's from Finland, so
right.
it's yeah,
Makes
but
sense. Yeah.
kind of makes sense, yeah. But his violin concerto is also just so dark and so heart wrenching, honestly. Like, and not that many things feel like that to me.
Huh.
And it's beautiful. Even the minor parts feel, I mean, the major parts feel sad, you know, like they're tinted. I
Huh.
think he was actually struggling. I really hope this is right. I think he was struggling with alcoholism a lot during his life, and maybe that kind of is why, you know, some of that, like his, even the happy moments are kind of tinted. So I don't know. Maybe that's overthinking. I don't know, and I could be totally wrong. But yeah, so that's number three, and the fourth is Bartok, his fifth string quartet. You know, so he wrote six, so the fifth one. Is it in a key? Actually, I don't know how tonal. I should know that, but it's Bartok is just so rhythmic, you know, and that's so fun, and it's so fun to play. That's actually the only quartet that I've never attempted to read, or I haven't worked on, but I have never sight read it. You know how, like, with your friends, sometimes you just go through something for fun, because it's kind of impossible to sight read. The rhythms are just crazy. Bartok is known for including a lot of folkism, right, in his music, so folk tunes and kind of a lot of this kind of thing, and he changes rhythm a lot, a signature, time signature. So it's very unsteady, and I think that kind of gives that sense of kind of, you know, like, not, yeah, rustic sort of, but not like nice and prim and classical, you know.
Right.
Um, but that piece,
Almost rowdy.
yeah,
Almost
totally,
rowdy. Yeah.
rowdy, totally, yeah. But that piece is just so fun to listen to. That's less of a like deep emotional connection and more it's just so pleasing, like the way it fits together. And his harmonies also are amazing, but it's a bit later, you know, it's more 20th century. So I mean, it is 20th century, and so his stuff is less like, oh, that's such a sad minor chord, because he has weirder stuff than that. So it's slightly different, you know, reaction that we have. But it's just so awesome, that piece, and it's super difficult. So I hope someday I can go into it very deeply. But and then my fifth thing is non-classical. It's the Eurythmics "Sweet Dreams" song.
Oh,
You know that Annie Lennox
wow.
in the
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, also in minor, in C minor, I think. Um, I
There
just
must be a story there about why that one makes it.
maybe, yeah. Well, no, I mean, I don't even. I think it's just that it's so fun. That's also super rhythmic, and her voice. It took me forever. Like, I used to think it was a guy, but it's so kind of, you know, deep or something, and it's just so satisfying to listen to. And the I think it's probably electronic, the background music, but it's so fun. It's just so fun. And I do think that there aren't that many composers who have this kind of rhythmic drive that I find a lot of pop music can have, you know, because of the bass. I mean, it makes sense, the bass
Right.
or whatever, it makes sense, and it's often on the offbeat in pop music. So I can think of a couple composers who have that. I would say probably Shostakovich and Dvorak are great with that kind of rhythmic drive. But yeah, that song is just, I don't know why, it's somehow perfect to me. Like, I love listening to that. And I'm always trying to find songs that are similar to that. But nowadays there aren't as many, because I think the quality has gone down from like the 80s, and, you know.
Well,
Um,
there's just so much, there's just so much. I mean, which is great for upcoming musicians, but it's, who's curating what we listen to,
Yeah.
what we hear. And
Yeah.
I have very strong memories with the Eurythmics, so I'll have to go back and listen to it as a person at this moment in time, because I have not listened to them in a long time. That's a great one.
Yeah.
How did you get exposed to that?
Yeah, my dad often would give me lists of songs to listen. I would ask him because I think I didn't love this was a while ago that I learned this song, probably I don't know, 10 years ago or something. So he would give me lists of things from his childhood because I think they're more interesting than stuff from my childhood. I mean, it makes sense, right? Everything is so automated these days, and you actually, I know this is mean, but you don't really have to have much talent to make it. A lot of the time now it's shifted to, other factors. So I think that is why it had to be more original. You have to actually know what you're doing back then, I think a lot of pop singers nowadays, I don't know, and maybe this is mean, but I think a lot of them might actually be tone deaf. It honestly has nothing to do with music. So some of them, not all of them.
No.
I love, Adele. I love Adele. I love Lady Gaga and stuff there who are actually artists, So,
right.
But yeah, my dad would often give me lists of things from his childhood. His sister, so my aunt is, she's in a rock band or something. So very, pretty successful actually. She's done that kind of stuff for a long time. So I guess he was very influenced by her taste. And she had pretty, she was cool. She was a cool girl in high school and college and stuff. So I think he just stole from whatever she listened to and kind of gave me lists from that. So that's fun. I like that.
That is fun. That's really fun. I found in my own adult life, the tables are turned. My kids are always saying, Mom, you should listen to this. And therefore I've been exposed to emo and rap and stuff I probably would never choose to listen to. But I'm glad to, it wouldn't be my first choice for things I would listen to, but I'm glad to know it. We just watched Hamilton, and if I had not had some experience of rap beforehand, even though that's a remarkably clear movie, you can really understand what they're saying so well. I don't know that I would have enjoyed it as much as I did, but because I had that experience with rap, I, found I really enjoyed it a lot. So,
yeah. I actually saw Hamilton in the theater. It was a last minute thing. Yeah, I don't know how that worked out. I guess my aunt someone had tickets and someone gave it to me. I went with my grandmother, and
wow.
Kind of funny. Yeah, it's funny because my friends would be like, oh my God, I've waited months for my tickets. So I guess I really lucked out. And I feel bad because honestly, to be honest, I didn't love it. And I think it's because, this makes sense. I mean, this is true in classical music. It helps to know beforehand, hear the stuff beforehand and listen to it. I think it helped that I knew relatively the story of, the war and stuff, but even then, so that's the one thing I don't understand is that I bet a lot of the audience members, no judgment, but I bet a lot of them don't actually know the story. So context. So I'm not sure why everyone loves it so much. It was so loud, honestly. It was just loud like that. And I was in the back and I was still like, oh my God, I'm getting a headache.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel bad. But I think also maybe from a musical perspective, this isn't fair, but having a pretty strong theory background and stuff, it's you have higher standards for whatever, even though it's a different genre. And I think I was just kind of judging instead of trying to enjoy it, which is not fair. So I should have learned the music beforehand and just tried to kind of enjoy the story. But there are some fun tunes from it. I was actually just listening yesterday because one of my cello students he loves playing stuff that he kind of hears, songs. So I was listening to the song that he wanted to learn on the cello, and that was fun. It's the King George III. You'll Be Back. Super fun.
Yeah. He's such a great character in it. Oh my God.
It's hilarious. Yeah. So,
a friend of I was at the library in Newburyport and I was checking some books out, and I was talking to the librarian, and this elderly woman came up to me and we were talking about Hamilton, and she put her hand on my arm and said, listen to it before you go. Check out the soundtrack, because I've been twice, and the first time it just went right past me.
Totally.
And then I listened to it, and now I love it. But she said that was an expensive lesson to learn. So
Really?
get it.
Seriously. Yeah, no, I agree with her. She's right. I wish she had told me that before I went.
Yeah. So we did, but even still, it was much, now with context, it's even better than I thought it was going to be. It was much more fun. And probably I shouldn't be on record as saying this, but I think that part of the genius of Lin-Manuel Miranda is that he did not have himself singing a lot.
Yeah.
He rapped a lot,
Sure.
but he did not sing a lot. He let the people with really remarkable voices carry the tune, so to speak. So, yeah, that was very smart, I think.
Yeah.
The surprise of that story to me was Eliza Hamilton. What a hero she turned out to be. I hope somebody decides to, here he was not the best father, husband, partner, and then he dies in that strange way that we learn about, and she goes on to carry on with his agenda.
Right.
No, I mean,
I think that probably happened more than we give credit. I don't know, because we don't hear, it's, I read, have you heard of Joseph Ellis?
No.
Author? He writes a lot about that time period, and I think it's historical fiction. I don't think it's true, but it's very, he's done his research and stuff, and he wrote a whole book about the Addams family, but it was mostly about Abigail and how, those days, like raising children, and then also kind of, she was like a huge part of the kind of brains behind a lot of his work, and I bet that happened more than we know.
I wonder, I've had the same thought, and Abigail Adams is one of my great heroes in life. I love every, I don't think I would have wanted to be married to her, but I love what I know about her. And I wonder, I've actually thought about whether people, this seems silly to say, but people ended up marrying others who shared the agenda, of their lives. And that was actually what brought them together. So maybe the way it was presented in the musical, Eliza Hamilton carried on Alexander's agenda, but maybe it was her agenda all along, and she just didn't have the visibility that he did. So that's a really interesting point. I'm going to check that out.
This is I tend to have a hard time with stuff that's too kind of, a lot of the time the historical stuff is not also interesting the way it's written. Right. I don't know, maybe it's the field and who it draws tend to be kind of, whatever. But this book was so, I actually read several of his books, but this was First Family, and then also Revolutionary Summer, I think. But I'll send you links. But yeah, super amazing, and really, honestly, couldn't put down, which is very unusual for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it feels good to read something like that, and you're kind of, you fill in gaps of kind of history, and it can be hard at times because of what we just said. Like, sometimes the books are not the most riveting, the way those stories are told, but this was like a pleasure to read, and a really fun way to fill in those gaps in my head, of history and kind of timeline, and it tends to, I like hearing a lot more about relationships than I do about, like, this is when this was signed and this is who thought it should be signed, and it makes so much more sense if you give context of the people and their lives, because otherwise it's kind of arbitrary facts that then it's hard to place in your head. I think a lot of people, I think that's why history can be difficult, because it tends to be just told in a way it's like facts. But then if there's no emotional attachment to any of these facts, it's kind of like it's like memorizing, and that's not as fun as an actual story where they click into place. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I do. I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, and I can tell you, dates and times and and places of, when the battle started, where they marched from, all that stuff. It was very war oriented. My history education was very war oriented, which isn't the thing I want to know about particularly. It's not our greatest quality as human beings, I don't think. And so the relationship thing, here I studied all that American Revolutionary history. Never knew till, I don't know, high school or maybe even older about the relationship between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson and how that evolved over time, and that they both died on the same day, hours apart, and it was the 4th of July.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a cool story to me.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so I know exactly.
Yeah, it's also interesting to hear when it's relationship kind of wise and person wise and stuff, and you're looking at the whole story. There are a lot of figures who it's easy to judge. It's always easy to judge. 200 years later or whatever, or more, obviously. But someone like Jefferson, they're interesting people, and it's so easy to just do like that. And I think people still do that nowadays about current things, and I think that it's like that thing you were saying about. I think we all need to just be able to. It would be great if we could all listen a little bit more and have slightly more nuanced opinions about people.
Yeah.
And events, but people also, and I think it creates more division when we are so quick to just judge and
right.
go like this to someone, So that was another interesting thing to kind of read about someone who, in general, not just him, but just books like this, where someone who you see where they're coming from sometimes, and it doesn't mean necessarily all actions are excused or whatever, but people are complicated, so it's nice to get into that,
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot about John Lewis yesterday with his passing, and some of the people who were saying negative things about him, surprised me. And then I thought, well, from their perspective, they're just looking at what they want the world to look like and not the bigger picture. And I think that's, context matters.
Yeah.
Whether it's
we all do that though, right? To a certain
Absolutely.
extent, that we can't help but have a viewpoint. I think it's just a question of how willing you are to try to always be evolving that and not kind of staying put in whatever you want. It's easy to, once you believe something, it's uncomfortable to not believe that anymore, right?
Yeah.
And also we all confirmation bias kind of thing. Whatever you're looking for, you're going to find. So it's about that.
Human nature, I think it's human nature.
Well, yeah, we stick with what's comfortable and what we're used to thinking and believing. It's easier.
Yeah. So these are tricky times that we're living in. I want to jump back to something that you said very briefly. So you teach cello too.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
And how did that come? Have you always done? I mean, not always, obviously, but have you done that for a long time?
Yeah, so my parents both teach a lot. My dad, she teaches chamber music, and my mom has a huge studio of tiny kids. Like, they start at, sometimes before 3 years old. I don't know how she does it, because patience-wise, little children, even though they're adorable, but my mom, I mean, she started the studio, I think, when I was born, basically. So I've always been around kind of teaching younger children. So yeah, I started helping her out with even a violinist when I was a cellist, when I was maybe 12 or something.
Oh.
And I think that's a really useful skill, not just for when I'm starting, when we all start our careers and stuff, there's usually a little bit of teaching, but I think it's also useful being able to articulate and communicate things to someone else, especially when they're younger, and you have to be really clear with what you say, and kind of coming up with ways to not necessarily inspire, but you can't just tell a kid, do this, and then they're going to do it. It's, especially with children, it's so much about the mental aspect and not just the technicalities, obviously. But I mean, when my mom tells me about her teaching, it's mostly how can I kind of get them to want to do this or that, and it's not like, oh, their fourth finger is not working, So I just think it's interesting to kind of get into that, and I think a lot of teachers don't get into that, and I've actually experienced that, teachers who don't really, they don't care about the mental aspect. They think it's all just about the fingers and what you're telling them to do with the fingers, and it's so much more than that, I think. But yeah, so right now I have mostly virtuals right now, but a couple kind of practice buddies who, I mean, I'm a practice buddy to people who have older teachers, and that's fun.
Oh,
And then also a couple who I'm actually the teacher, I guess. So I have to be in charge of those things that I was just saying. And it's interesting. I have different range of ages, so like like 10 to an adult who's older than I am. So
oh.
it's just interesting. It's a very different kind of communication, but it's fun. It's really fun.
And is that something you do during the school year or no?
Less, but I do. Yeah, yeah. So,
Wow.
that's one thing that might be good that's coming out of this pandemic is that we're all getting more, adept at using the technology and making it work. So it would be much easier to teach, honestly, online uh, more than doing, as many lessons in person because it just takes more time. Although I have to say, I really don't like staring at a screen. It hurts my eye,
Yeah.
my head. But yeah, so it's possible that that'll actually free some options up for people in the future going forward, even after the pandemic.
So how old's your youngest student?
Right now, 10. I have two
Oh,
10-year-olds. Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
And how many do you have altogether, students at this point? I know it.
Not many. I don't do much. Maybe 4 or something. But actually,
Okay.
my family, when we so my sister and I were going to do 2 music camps this summer, separate camps, right? And they both got canceled, right? Or virtual, so it's
Mhm.
very, different. Um, and so my mom decided to put together with the 2 of us, and also my stepsister, who's a violinist in LA. The 4 of us kind of put together an online string camp for kids. I think it was 5 or 6 to 13. So it was a very wide range. So we put together actually a 3-week camp at the beginning of June. It was a very big project. We made a whole website and everything. It was very official, advertising and stuff, which was a really great experience. But we did group classes of little kids, which tests your patience.
I yeah.
I I was so tired after those 3 weeks, but it was also really fun. And yeah, so that was also a lot of teaching, and that was fun. But you learn a lot through that, And it's like we were saying, like it's so much about also just keeping their attention and their engagement in what they're doing, and less actually about what they're doing. That's actually a challenge. That's difficult, especially over the
Yeah.
computer where there's no consequence. If these 6-year-olds don't want to do it, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they throw a
No.
stick in the corner. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, other than having their parent in the background nagging them, which would only add to the trouble, I would
Yeah.
think. So,
Yeah, and also I think a lot of these parents wanted they took it as a kind of almost paid like babysitting education time because then their kids were locked in a room at a computer. So
yeah.
it's helpful to
Yeah.
them, I think, too. Yeah,
Was it all day or was it just a
no,
morning or?
it was 9 to 1, so we had 4 hours every morning for 3 weeks, which was a lot.
And I bet your parents went and wept with joy. I mean, that's been so hard for people, I think, to
Yeah,
work, be a parent 24/7. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
So
kind
you did a great mental health thing for those parents as
of
well.
hopefully.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. I mean, I always think if you have to teach something, it forces you to understand what you're teaching in a different way. But I just hadn't thought about you teaching, so that's really fun to know about you. Very fun to know about you. Okay, so um, what? Tell me about a gift the best gift you've ever been given.
So my sister made me when I think I was turning 12 or something, and she was pretty little, she was like 8 or something, and she made me. She's always been very handy and creative, and she made me a whole deck of cards. Each were like decorated, and they were really mini, so I could take them with me everywhere. And it was just the sweetest thing because I think she also made me a note, and it was just so carefully, like she made sure they all looked alike, and it was like 52 cards. That's no small thing. And at 8 years old, I think it's less that they were not necessarily as useful as other cards because they were but it was more the thought that was just so sweet that that's always kind of, I still have them carefully tucked away in my drawer. I think I'm so afraid to use them because, you know, she
I
made
want
it.
to lose one or something. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's
That was, I
wonderful.
think, probably the most thoughtful gift I've ever gotten.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really wonderful. What about what about I'm trying to think of the few things that seem like it would be fun to know about you. And the strange part about this is people are going to come up to you in Newburyport probably and act like they know, you know, you're their new best friend because you're going to reveal all these little secrets. But do you have a favorite concert you've been to? Because you said earlier it's hard for you to be an audience member as a professional yourself. And so is there a concert that
Yeah.
moved you?
Yeah, so there's one, I can think of two actually that have kind of stuck in my memory because okay, well the more recent one was seeing Mahler 5, and this was actually on my list, but then when I had to shorten my deserted slash desert island list down, I had to take it off. But um, I went to the Juilliard Orchestra, so the college orchestra in Carnegie Hall, and they played Mahler 5, which I don't know if you know it. You probably, yeah, sort of.
I mean, a little bit, not as well as you do, I'm sure.
It's a great piece. I actually didn't know much Mahler until recently, because he's mostly kind of symphonic piano
Yeah.
stuff, and I tend to listen to more chamber music. But um, again, this piece is so dark, and I love that. And it starts off with this amazing trumpet solo. I think that it's solo. That's it for like a minute long, and it's just so dark in a way that but I think this concert sticks out because I don't know, it's in Carnegie, which kind of already gives off a vibe, and it was, I think it's because it was all these people on stage who I knew, like I know all of them, and I was sitting way in the back with my friend and hearing, I think it was as much about the experience as it was about the music, but hearing the whole, all of Carnegie Hall fill up with literally the sounds that my friends were making out of their instruments that came together as a whole thing and filled the whole area was just so, I don't know, it was just amazing. It was really cool.
I
And
hadn't
that
thought
was,
about that.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
to have it.
the piece is also just very epic and painful and has a lot of kind of gravity. And so everything that all tied together. It might have been different if it had been, a little Mozart symphony in C major. I don't know if I would have felt the same way, but even though I love Mozart. But yeah, and I think the other concert I was going to say was a long time ago, and I think it was definitely not my first chamber music concert, but it's the first one that I remember actually enjoying and not feeling like, okay,
Yeah.
when you're little, like it's
Yeah.
you might like music, but my attention span, it's still not that great. So, but I think it was in the Kimmel Center, and I think it was the Jasper and Jupiter string quartets. I could be wrong, but I think it was
Oh.
the 2J quartets that I think are both Philly based. And they played octets together. So it's 8 people on stage, and they played the Shostakovich octet and the Mendelssohn octet, which are both super fun pieces. It's just, they're both really fun. I've played both of them. And I think that was the first time I came away from a concert thinking, oh my God, that was actually cool, at like 11 years old or something. It wasn't just kind of like, oh, okay, boring, like classical music. But I think that's probably because of like what we were talking about before, the energy that 8 people, when they're just literally rocking out together, it's just so fun and it looks so fun. And the music is really good too, yeah, so those are the two that I kind of stick in my mind as fun.
Interesting. Well, so you raise this is an off the script question, but one of the great challenges for groups like the Newburyport Chamber Music Festival is how do we let me preface this by saying the demographics in Newburyport are shifting, and a lot of younger people are moving out of the city and into Newburyport. And one of our great challenges is how do we attract people to chamber music that maybe haven't been exposed to it or whatever. And so it's interesting. It's it's more a statement, I guess, than a question, unless you have an idea. But Juilliard has how many students, roughly, would you say?
probably 1,000 classical music.
Yeah, I would bet. Yeah. And they're all, you know, 35 and under. And so there are people who love chamber music. I was a person who couldn't play it, but loved it when I was in high school. And I mean, I loved hearing about how you were watching your peers playing in Carnegie Hall, this, profound piece of music, epic, as you said. And they're all 35 and under. And I wonder how we get people in the seats, who don't fit the normal classical music demographic. I don't know. Does that ever come up in conversation?
Yeah, I agree. I don't really know because I think that there's a tendency when you're maybe like you're saying under 35 or something. The reason we all like it and love doing it is because it's fun for us. But I have to say that I don't know if I weren't a musician right now and I didn't really know much about it. I think I would probably think it's boring to kind of sit there. Like some people I think turn on the, even if they're 30, they might put on the radio to some calming classical music. But I think in a way, music, it attracts people who are more experienced in life in maybe those listening skills that you were saying and kind of less, I don't want to say self-absorbed, but I think it takes a certain amount of kind of just outward attention to even let it come into influence you. So I think most of my friends, if they don't know someone who's a musician, like if I were to go back to my high school and say, oh, Beethoven Quartet, and I'm like, oh my God. And I don't blame them. I don't think they would enjoy a Beethoven Quartet concert, It's possible that maybe that concert that I told you about, like the Shostakovich Octet, where the energy is just so contagious, they might find that fun, maybe kind of more like a pop concert where it's the energy that they feed off of. But even that, like people my age who don't do music, the reason they like going to pop concerts is not really because the music is so pleasing. It's because of the experience of the beat and the dancing and the vibe, And classical music concerts don't generally have that vibe. And I think if we wanted to gear towards audiences like that, it would have to be a different kind of. It's a different goal, honestly.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But that's really interesting. One of my favorite musicians is a guy named Chris Thiele, who's a mandolinist, and he started out in a band called Nickel Creek, which was considered kind of a progressive bluegrass band. And we used to live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they came to a famous musical venue in Tulsa, and we went to hear them play. And they played their first set, and you stand. There are no seats at this venue. You stand for however long. There's a bar and other things, but it's very, relaxed, let's just say that. And they took their break and went off stage, and very soon after they took their break, he came back out by himself. And everybody thinks he's, all that. And so they were like, oh, yay, Chris is on stage. And he leaned into the microphone and said, can you all settle down? I want to play something I've been working on for you. And everybody cheered and, clinked their beer bottles and stuff. And then he started playing a Bach partita. And people were sort of starting to talk amongst themselves again and stuff. And he stopped and he said, no, really, listen to this. This is really cool. Right. And so everybody's like, oh, okay. Chris says it's cool. So, and he played the whole thing, and it was silent when he finished. And his virtuosity was so apparent at that piece. Now, I don't know how many people went out of there saying, I got to get me some Bach, but at least they were exposed to it. But I think what that says is that the energy and the way it's delivered is key to how people experience it. You're right. And it is a different goal for the Chamber Music Festival. I mean, we always are trying to expose more people to chamber music in the Newburyport area, but it's a very different goal. Yeah. Well, let's do one more question. And that is my favorite one that your dad asked everybody else, which is, do you have a place in the world that is special above all else?
Can I say two?
Okay.
Okay, well, the first is just because it's kind of a family place, which is the Mohonk Mountain House. It's kind of it's a vacation place, I guess, but it's a, it's in the woods, and there's a lake, but it's surrounded by trees, and it's this huge kind of hotel. Not flashy though. It's not new and fancy. And my dad, I think, grew up going there every summer or winter or something like that. And so I've been going since I was really little, with my sister. And it's just, I think it's more about the memories. You know, you go there and what you associate with. I would go with my dad and my grandparents, who are both passed away now. But it's just kind of, it's our place. You know, it kind of feels like that. We actually haven't gone in a while, but hopefully soon. And the other place is, this is kind of a lame answer because I feel like everyone would say this, but I love London. I love being in London. It's definitely, if I could live anywhere, it would actually be there. I love New York also, but I think London is cooler. And I think there's something about there are so many, it's like the Euro thing. There's so many tiny streets and alleys in London that feel like Diagon Alley in Harry Potter, you know, where it's like little Christmas shops or something, and I love that feeling, you know. And in New York and Philly and stuff, it's kind of, there are a few streets like that, but generally, first of all, they're not as old, so it doesn't have that feeling, but it's dirtier here, and it's not as kind of classy and cozy, and I just love those tiny streets in London, and it's amazing.
It's more avenues in the American cities, right?
Yeah, so not like flashiness and kind of, you know, big stores with neon, whatever. So yeah, I that's why I love London.
I haven't heard anybody say London, and I think what's really great about having two is, one shows that you have this appreciation for non-urban life, and the other is this love of the vibe, the urban vibe. Have you traveled a ton? Have you benefited from traveling a lot?
I've actually, I guess it's mostly Europe, so maybe that's still kind of a narrow, you know, it's relatively similar, but I've been to a lot of places in Europe. I used to travel with my dad a lot, not so much now because of school, but we've been like everywhere in Europe, and that's been awesome. I think it's great. I think it's a very good education for people. I think more of us should. I mean, obviously there are reasons it's hard to travel, but I think it's really good to kind of experience lots of different cultures, you know, which I guess going to Europe is about as non-different as I could get, possibly, in some ways. So maybe I still have a lot more that I need to, you know, experience culture-wise. But yeah, I love kind of experiencing different foods and stuff. That's actually one of the main things my dad and I kind of plan our trips around. It's usually music related, so I'll go for a recital, but he'll kind of plan all these different restaurants in that city and try to find out from the people there. He's very good about planning travel and find out where the spots are that aren't the tourists. You know, we avoid tourist things at all costs, you know, and kind of navigating a new city and meeting new people. And honestly, when it's a different language, that's kind of fun too, because you have to find a different way to communicate, you know, and it's just, I think it's great to do that.
Okay, so the pandemic's over, we're all vaccinated, we're good to go, and you could, you know, your next trip, where would it be? The one place you would go if you could step out the door and go today, where would it be?
I would go to Tokyo.
Oh.
Yeah, because I've never been to Asia, and I think that's definitely a different vibe, you know, and also the food. And I've heard really fun things about Tokyo. I've heard it's not quite as, you know, like Beijing is like packed with, you know, like face to face, nose to nose, with kind of dirtiness and people and bad air and stuff. But I've heard that Tokyo's not quite like that, and I think, yeah, it would be fun. And it's very different culturally, and I think it would be interesting to experience that. So I can't wait.
Wow.
For that.
Not even a moment's hesitation. That was great. Well, this has been awesome. You've been really generous with yourself and your time. Thanks for doing this. Anything else you want to throw into the conversation?
No, I think that's pretty thorough. We've just covered a lot of topics, so
I could talk to you longer.
I'm excited to be back in Newburyport. because it's just honestly, if I had to say three places, I would probably say Newburyport is my third place of special place in my heart, because that too has been since I was a kid. I think it was started when I was like a couple months old, because I think I'm a year ahead of the festival age-wise.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
So I've been to Newburyport probably every year of my life, and often more than once. And that's been kind of fun to like. It's a small enough town that, I feel like I know the place. And I think I was allowed to walk freely, like alone, in Newburyport before I was allowed in Philly or New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have a pretty clear memory of kind of, when you're a kid and you go to like certain landmarks and you know those places, but you have no idea how they connect to each other. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the Thai place could have been 6 miles away from the coffee place around the corner on, what is it, State Street, but I wouldn't have known when I was a kid. And I think piecing that together kind of in my internal, my mind map has been really satisfying. So now I feel like I know Newburyport,
Yeah. There's a bunch of new restaurants for you all to try when you're back. So
Is that because they went out of business because of COVID, or
that's a good question. There's one on Pleasant Street that we've tried a couple of times. She's Cambodian, and it's a very small menu, but it's seriously great.
Awesome.
Southeast Asian.
Newburyport is a really good foodie town also, and that's part of why, if it weren't, then I don't think it would have, I would look forward to it so much. But you can get almost everything you need, and also it's like, you have markets and stuff that are actually good quality and local and fresh and stuff, and that makes a difference. So it's awesome. Yeah. Super
lucky. Well, it's sort of amazing, as you said, I think I've been going there all my life. How cool that now you're a professional with the quartet.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
I mean, I'm very excited about that. I mean, I'm sure your dad is probably the most excited about it. And this idea of wandering the streets of Newburyport and sitting down and playing and then picking up and wandering again. I hope the weather's great and it's just more fun for everybody than we can even imagine. It'll be good for our souls to have live music in Newburyport for sure.
Yeah, so. Good for us to play it. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Really looking forward to it. We'll see you in a month.
Yeah. Thank you,
okay.
Beth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eliana. See you later.
Bye.